Firstly, on behalf of Destination North Coast and Keith Whelan, we'd like to thank you for your time today and for your interest in this subject matter and participation in today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to go through some housekeeping for today's session. It was set up that all participants were meant to be on mute and without any video. Some people seem to be coming through with that function, so we will be muting and turning off video for all people besides myself and Keith. Keith will give a presentation, will probably take 30 to 40 minutes, which will enable Q&A at the end. You are able to submit questions for the Q&A session through the chat function on the navigation bar, so please do so. I will probably clump similar questions for Keith together to ensure that we are able to cover as much ground as possible and as much subject matter as possible. So before I hand over to Keith, I'll just do a brief introduction. So to many, he is known as the Grants Guy due to his extensive experience and knowledge in this space. Keith has worked with not-for-profits, charities, universities, government departments and agencies, sports clubs, Aboriginal groups, arts organisations and educational bodies, providing him with a great insight into the needs for funding in Australia and the opportunity to educate clients on what grants exist and how to apply. So obviously a highly relevant subject at the moment, and there is a science to grant writing, and it can greatly increase your chances of getting that funding that is drastically needed at the moment. So without any further delays, I'll hand over to Keith, who will now run the session. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. Let's get your grant ready. Let's talk about basically where you need to be. And obviously that's looking at two things in terms of grants at the moment in Australia. One is obviously the COVID-19 stimulus package being released by local, state and federal government agencies and across the board, and being prepared for that obviously, which is direct funding. It's quintessentially not grants per se. It's not an acquittal or adjudication process involved, but certainly you still have to be prepared and be grant ready for that to a certain degree as well. But obviously looking at the grants that are available at the moment to businesses at all tiers essentially, from all government departments, and will be again probably before the end of the financial year, and will be again post COVID-19 basically, and the grants that are ever present as well, whether it be from Destination New South Wales, all tiers of government for tourism basically across the board, and the stimulus package is now ready and available basically, and we'll go through some of those resources in a while and what's there, okay? But we're looking at what's there at the moment. 130 million for the JobKeeper, 27 million for Indigenous arts, regional arts basically out there as well, which may be an option obviously for tourism entities to go through at the end of the day. I need you to think outside the box. I need you to look at the arts funding that's been released as well, and that's, even if that's relatable for you over the weekend, what's been released there. New South Wales small business bushfire funding is there, still there for certain regions obviously as well. As I said, the Council for the Arts and Resilience Programme as well. I'm just going to get out of this one actually because I'll bring up my tourism side. Just bear with me a moment, sorry folks. And I'm just going to get back to sharing the right presentation. Sorry, just bear with me a moment. Just realized from the last one I'm done. So bear with me a moment, please. Guys, just gonna try and do this. Stop share for a sec and just bring it back to get where I want to. Sorry. So yeah. Sorry, folks, won't be too long. Apologise.
Just as Keith is looking, just bring up the correct presentation. Just for those latecomers who've come in, everybody will be muted and video will not be enabled. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you want to submit questions, please do so through the chat function. And I think we may be up and running again in a second.
Yeah, sorry, Michael, one too many webinars today. I apologise, basically. As you said, everyone wants to know where the grants are now.
Yeah, no problem. Back over to you, Keith.
how to get them basically across all the sectors as well. So, but talking about what I just said, thanks, Michael. The arts is an opportunity there for a lot of organisations and tourism entities as well. I really want to advocate that you do need to think outside the box in terms of being a tourism entity. Now, while there's straightforward tourism funding and business funding available, you do need to look at what other sectors are available to you as well if you want to collaborate. And that's very important for government. Government doesn't necessarily like silo-esque opportunities. It looks collaboration and partnership. So I need you to think as a tourism entity now outside the box, which is, do you collaborate with council? Do you collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce? Do you collaborate with your local tourism authority, basically? And look at that collaboration possibility. That's all I want you to look at the present time. But going back to what I said, these are some of the grants that are open at the moment, certainly for Small Business Support Fund as well. That's very apt for a lot of tourism entities, obviously, across the state of New South Wales. There's some great resources out there. Business.gov.au is a fantastic website to look at it from a federal point of view. Your Grant Connect, which is another federal website as well. The New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment is a really good website to look at as well. Destination New South Wales obviously itself as a template for a lot of the grants that have already been in existence and potentially will be forthcoming again. And I wanted to show that as a nice segue to what was available previously with Destination New South Wales Flagship Event Fund. Now for me, a lot of what's here in key criteria is applicable for a lot of tourism grants you're going to be applying for in the future, both post-COVID-19 and standard operational business year or financial year anyway. So learn from the past applications, adapt basically that you have there, and look at defining the character and culture of the local area. So your knowledge base of the local area, your knowledge of the tourism industry. A grant application is a glorified sales pitch. It really is about selling. Okay, so just like writing a CV that you're going to apply for a job, this is writing a grant application that you're going to apply for funding. Okay, so it's an investment, not a gift. All right, so there's ROI and KPIs attached to a grant application and a grant delivery. So key performance indicators, return on investment. And certainly we're working off the key acronym because it is acronyms, obviously, the new grants speak. VFM. For government, that's value for money because it's taxpayers' money. So you must always prove value, but you must prove character and culture and knowledge of your tourism sector that you're operating it in. And certainly if it's an infrastructure project, to use the old adage, if you build it, will they come? You got to show me indicatively that you have done your analysis, your market analysis, your gap analysis, your competitor analysis, that you're understanding and you're a market leader in your area, and that what's going to attract tourists to the area, what's going to attain, retain, and maintain them, and basically what's going to activate them basically to have extra expenditure, whether it be with other hoteliers, restaurateurs, event space, whatever the case may be, museums, galleries. And again, if you're a part of that collaboration or consortium, that you can advocate that. Attract overnight visitors, always a quintessential component, attracting overnight visitors in everything that you do, basically, that they can stay the extra night for accommodation and then avail of other activities the day after. Have a well-developed marketing plan. For me, any grant emanates from you having 3 or 4 policy documents that you extrapolate from, and then obviously look at putting into the grant application. What I mean by that is have a business plan, have a project plan, have a CapEx, your capital expenditure or your budget, and then have a marketing plan. They are like your templates for a lot of the questions that you're going to get in a grants application. I need you to extrapolate from those plans, those templates that you've created in advance, save you the pain and heartache down the other end of the line in terms of grants, and then populate the grant application with content you've already written. Okay, rather than doing last minute grant applications, because last minute grant applications is not where you need to be. They're never successful. Quantifiably, they always fail. So you need to look at a process, policy, or procedure for your organization moving forward, not only in COVID-19 funding, but post-COVID-19 funding. And do you have that resource within your organization? Do you need to use a grants writer? Do you need to use a grants consultant, bringing them in? Have a well-developed marketing plan, as I said. Develop clear strategies for measuring and evaluating visitation and visiting experience. So again, how are you measuring the numbers? How are you quantifying and qualifying that basically you are worthy of funding because you are pulling in the visitors, you are putting in the tourism experience? Have you quantified that? That would be part of your business plan or yearly analysis of where you need to be. And secondary criteria for Destination New South Wales, which is just as important as the primary criteria, contribute to our local regional tourism strategies and align with relevant destination management plans, which means you need to have read those plans and show that basically what you are aligned to it. And that what they're trying to achieve is Destination New South Wales, is what you're trying to achieve in the tourism sector. And understand the local and regional tourism strategies that are available, both from local government and Destination New South Wales, and that you've read them, understand them, and apply them in your grant application. All right, synchronicity of thought and synchronicity of process is what I want to see. Demonstrate. In English, show engagement with local tourism industry with a view to building partnerships that drive visitation. Show me through your track record, show me through your historical value, show me as evidence-based of a previous project or undertaking that you've committed to the tourism sector in your region, how well it did, how you achieved it. That's what I want to see. So that microcosm mini case study, 60 words or less, showing me indicatively how you've done similar projects to similar value in the past. Have a well-structured and organized event management committee or company, and access to operational marketing expertise, ability to handle issues with public liability and insurance matters. Government agencies and government departments are risk averse, and rightly so. So that means I need to see a risk mitigation strategy or risk management plan. May not want to see it up front, but I'm expecting you again to extrapolate from that to write your grant application. So have that if you don't have one, or develop that if you don't have one now. The event must demonstrate it has adequate public liability insurance and other relevant insurance cover. So make sure you're ticking the box on insurance cover, right? Government like to work off a TQM policy or process, total quality management. Okay, everything you do, you're risk averse. You cover off on governance, probity, transparency, insurances, all those components is what they want to see, all right? You have the support of local council, as I advocated, all right? So local council, state and federal MPs, get letters of reference, get testimonials, have people basically advocating your services and what you do, whether it be through obviously Destination New South Wales and its affiliates, chambers of commerce, BECs and the like. Demonstrate sound financial management. I will be looking for a copy of your P&Ls. So obviously make sure that you work with your accountant very tightly on putting together a budget that's suitable for the grant application. Have a capacity to grow and be sustainable without government funding. So again, that's going to be hard, particularly in the current environment with COVID-19, that they're now looking at sustainability. They always look for innovation. Innovation and sustainability are two key components in grants. But now more than ever, it's sustainable. Sustainable that you can come out the other side of COVID-19, and what's that world going to look like? And basically, how are you going to be predominant or prominent as a tourism entity on that side? What plan, what are you doing? What's the brokerage and advocacy you're doing within government, basically to government, to say, look, this is what I envisage for the tourism sector in my area. Let's partner together. Let's make that come true and transition that into reality. So what's required? You need to be building capacity in your community, with namely your business sector, namely your tourism sector, sustainability, as we said, creating a profile for your business, planning your grant application, the processes, the templates, as I said in advance, being proactive rather than reactive. That's having a grants calendar. All right, and a lot of the resources, a lot of those government websites that I gave you earlier on, particularly Grant Connect and business.gov.au, have listings for all the government grants, particularly at federal level, but go to the relevant government state departments and agencies like Destination New South Wales to see what is open in terms of grants. Acquittal of the grant, this is the big problem all the time. People aren't doing the reporting, so the successful recipients of funding basically aren't actually reporting on how well they did, that they delivered on time and on budget in terms of their grant. Obviously, you can't seek further grant funding until you've acquitted your previous grant funding, so make sure you do that, please. Again, to reiterate, I'm expecting you to extrapolate from 3 policy documents that you should have as a business, and that you'll be taking the content from these to write your grant application. So the project plan, what you're seeking to achieve funding for, your business plan, your overarching business plan for your organization for the next 3 to 5 years, and your capital expenditure, namely your budget. And your application must connect quite clearly to me, communicate quite clearly to me, and show me indicatively how you're going to deliver on time and on budget with the grant. Time and capacity is the biggest issue we find with a lot of grant applicants. Time to write the grant, capacity to deliver the grant. Don't fall into those pitfalls. Okay, please understand that this is a process, this is a skill set, and that basically optimally government grants are open for 4 to 6 weeks, a long time in some instances, but not a lot in others, because you're looking at doing a draft per week, quintessentially. That's going to take time and effort. Do you have time and effort to do that? Do you need to outsource someone to help you with that, obviously, at the end of the day? And then the capacity at the other end, obviously, to report and evaluate everything you're doing once upon successful receipt of the funding. Okay. So what funders look for? Well, who are you, obviously? What do you want the money for? How does this link with your strategic plan? How will it impact, and even who will it impact? Obviously, the greater clientele, the greater customer base, the greater tourism experience base. How can you bring people into the region? How can you get them staying in the region? How can you advocate further activities for them to participate in? What's your strategy around your grants? What's your storytelling? A very prominent feature now of grants is business storytelling. Your narrative of where you come from, where you are, and where you're going as a business. Your total project value, even though you may be only asking for a component of it. And people give to people, not to projects, which means relationships, which a lot of the time people don't substantiate in grants. It's key in everything else you do in business, networking and relationship building. It's part of your business development process. Same in grants. You need to talk to funding bodies in advance of the application. For probity reasons, they can't obviously talk to you during that period of time when the grant is actually open. But you need to establish relationships with key stakeholders well in advance of basically the application coming forward, which is relevant agencies, relevant departments, local government, state government, whatever the case may be. So you can create a mindset for yourself. You can create that they are trying to get you across the line, and they can reciprocate a mindset rather than you just being application number 000353, going back to bullet point number 1, and them not knowing who you are at the end of the day. Okay. And that, by the way, is a nice, just as a caveat on top of that, is developing your social media as well, doing a lot of narrative and business storytelling in advance of writing your grant, because if you're shortlisted in a number of grants, whether it be public or private sector, I'm going to Google you. I'm going to look at aspects of your business, namely your website, namely your social media, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram, your YouTube, whatever you're doing, basically, that you're seen as a market leader in your tourism economy locally. What funders are looking for, they're not just buying an output, but they're buying an outcome. Government loves inputs, outputs, outcomes, and quantifying every business narrative against inputs, outputs, and outcomes. That's quintessentially very, very important for them. So you need to be mindful of that and structure your narrative and your grant writing around that at the end of the day. To invest in positive impact, obviously something has to happen with the funding and the money. So that's very, very important. Evidence of demand, you got to prove that it's needed and it's wanted. Obviously, you've done your surveying, you've done your data analysis. There's proof of outcome, which is very, very important, obviously. And for applicants to stop talking about activities and projects and talk about impacts. Okay, what's going to happen with the money, certainly. Remember, funding bodies give grants for solutions, not problems. And all too often with grants, we get people just telling us the problem, never giving us a solution. The money is only given for solutions to the issues. In fact, government are well across usually what's happening in the sector and what needs to happen in the sector. So you need to reflect that in your application, okay? So your grants checklist, I've tried to do an abbreviated version here of what you need to look at in terms of your process of writing a grant. Are there grants for us? So get a grants calendar, build a grants calendar. Are we eligible? Very important, obviously. Know what grants are available, making the submission, doing the writing, doing the work, delivering on the grant, you've been a successful recipient of it, and the reporting and the acquittal of such. What makes for a successful proposal? Well, it's within the scope of the funding body's area of giving. Very, very important. Sufficient documentation supported with facts and stats. All right, they are the most tangible things you can include. Referencing government reports, referencing tourism reports, all of these things substantiate your argument at the end of the day. Very, very important. A project that reflects people's needs and organizational needs, not just for you. It's really much if you have an infrastructure project that if you build it, they will come. You got to show the indicative value to the tourist, to the customer, to the client, as much as it's going to build obviously your firm and your business and what you do in the tourism sector. It's for the end user you need to convince of. Why are projects declined? I could spend all day on this, to be honest with you. I've just kind of limited to 2 slides. These are some of the fundamental reasons why projects get knocked back in terms of grants or grant applications we say no to. And again, we need that wow factor. We need someone to grab us, really. And that's where you're looking at the first 20 words, impact statements. Of every grant answer you provide, the impact statement is very, very important. First 20 words, where it's usually won or lost with a grants assessor, that you're answering the question, you're on point, you're on narrative, it makes sense, okay? So it's poorly written, you're not matching what government are trying to achieve in terms of their funding objectives, you're asking for too much money. We get that a lot of the time, even though it's a requirement, obviously, to stipulate how much you can apply for. You haven't looked at community capacity building, as government call it. You haven't worked with other tourism entities in the area. potentially to show, you know, a wider demographic or leverage or wider geographic for leveraging that funding. Too ambitious in scope in your project objectives, didn't follow the guidelines, insufficient evidence, where it's speculative. We get a lot of waffle wordology, blue sky statements. Again, it's thinking about using inverse pyramid, start broad and then narrow the focus in terms of your argument and what you're saying. The evaluation procedure is inadequate. As I said, no one's doing evaluations, and I don't know why. There seems to be a detrimental reason as to why. Statement of need. This is like a go, no-go document in tender writing. Very, very important. And it's not just for grants, for you as a business overall. And I think that's what you need to think about. Is statement of need, 15 to 30-minute exercise, 10 optimal questions. You can Google statement of need today, and you'll get all the templates. Download those, adapt one for your business, and really look, excuse me, at where you need to be in terms of optimizing, not wasting your time applying for a grant. So going through these questions and going thumbs up, thumbs down by the end, and then basically quantifying, qualifying where you should actually apply for the grant or not. And just to continue that, there are some of the optimum questions. Brainstorm and write down 3 needs and solutions for each. Save yourself time up front. Don't go pursue a grants process or pursue a grants application that you're never going to get funded for at the end of the day. Go through a statement of need process to help you actually identify whether you're going to have a sporting chance of receiving that funding at the end of the day. Measuring outcomes, they want to see again that, you know, you observe best practice, good governance, you're an articulate business, articulate tourism entity. So you're all about your goal statement, your objective statement, your mission statement. Activities and tasks are necessary to accomplish the objective, benefits and results, and how you measure success. They want that quality assurance, that ISO 9001 benchmark, that you are the best of the best, and they want to work with the best of the best. Okay, so understand about profiling yourself, but understand about substantiating that profile at the same time as well. So I've given this as a case study of what I do when I get a government grant application. So they're already in a grants process telling you where the grants are in 2 places. First place is the background to why the grant's been formulated. But everyone's in such a rush, they go straight to the application form. So you need to read the background to why the grant's been formulated and where you synchronize with that as well. Secondly is the grant application form itself. They're giving you the answers to the questions in the questions. So what I've highlighted here is what I do when I do a grants application. I highlight the keywords that I must address in answering my question. And what I've highlighted here are indicative: primary purpose, brief overview, description, what your project will do, how you're going to achieve those objectives. And it's 3,000 characters of 500 words equivalent, because now we do online applications, which means it's a character count. Okay, so you're going to have to be very watertight in your editing, your proofreading. Demonstrate obviously means show in English. I need to see a case study. I need to see a case study of how you've done it in the past, how you've succeeded in garnering funding in the past, runs on the board, people validating you for further funding or past funding. Describe implementation value for money. VFM, as I said, is very popular for government as an asset determination. And to demonstrate your experience. Show me indicatively how you've developed, delivered, managed, and monitored activities and projects in the past. You've runs on the board, and you can do it again. And you're worthy of investment because of that. Conditions of a grant, well, you need to do the report, obviously, do the evaluation. You're properly insured, you have OH&S, WHS, all the right credentials. And you have legal permission, so whether you're putting in the DA can be pending or confirmed depending on the grant. But this is what I want to see, that you have that mindset of professionalism, that you know what's required to apply for the grant. 50-50 funding, very, very popular with government, particularly local government, matched funding. In some instances, you can put in kind, so logistics, resources, manpower, etc. But most of the time, it's straightforward funding. You come up with 50% of the funding, I'll match it. So it's prevalent in local government. Could be an opportunity for you there to leverage your project. And you've read and understand the conditions. And if you have a question, there's an information hotline, there's an email address, there's usually a face-to-face or a webinar session. Use it, okay? Because those resources are there for you to help you write a better grant application by the government agency themselves. So apply for grants with particular identified needs, okay? That it aligns to what you're trying to achieve. You picked out the right grant, it aligns to what you're trying to achieve, fits in that category of what government want to fund. Taking into account the time to deliver on the grant if successful, all right? So deliver on time and on budget. Available grantors for the type and purpose, the grantors' requirements, what they want from the grant, what they want to see from the grant, when the funds are needed, basically, when they can dispense them to you as well, and organizations' policies, both yours and theirs. But quintessentially, you need to be singing off the same hymn sheet. You need to be looking at what government want to achieve, or any tourism entity wants to achieve, and their dispensing funding is what you want to achieve. And you must show that in your argument. Okay? How do you collaborate with others? Very, very important. Okay? Government quintessentially doesn't like a lot of silo-esque applications. To think about who you can partner with in the tourism sector to add value to your application. So talk about the need for funding, the commercial potential. As I said, we all needed the money yesterday now, given the COVID-19 circumstances, but certainly talk about the future, talk about how you're going to grow the sector, grow the visitor economy, grow the tourism region by what you're trying to do, basically. VFM, I talked about value for money. Private sector, which I think reflects well still on government as well. VFM, what's in it for me? Where can I leverage my brand and logo, basically, as well, which you have to be cognizant of. The market opportunity for government in terms of investment reflects well on them, but reflects well on you as a market leader. Management capability, they certainly ask for management bios now, or staff bios that are going to be coordinating the project as well and delivering on the grants, so you want to prepare those in advance. And the local, state or national benefits, the knock-on effect basically, that there's be a learning from this for government in terms of an articulate tourism project that could be potentially translatable then from New South Wales into WA or Tasmania per se. So know the program rules, plan your application, be creative but honest. Don't tell them you can do it in 12 months when it's going to take you 36 months to do it. Research successful grants. They're really, really good, like the one I showed you earlier on from Destination New South Wales. Basically, that grant's been recurrent for a number of years. Successful grants program rolled out by Destination New South Wales. Look at previous recipients. Look at their projects they've actually ascertained funding from. Learn about that and learn the standard questions that are come up again and again and again, and prep those in your templates, obviously, well in advance. Provide the information required. That's all I need. If I want more information, I'll ask for it. So don't be trying to put in more hyperlinks, attach more documents. There's this compulsion in grants writing, people trying to put in as much as possible. Less is more. That's the abiding rule. Answer the question you're asked, not what you think you're asked, and no superfluous information. So grants is telling a story, painting a picture with words. It's a business narrative. So get away from that last minute application and pressing send. Not very good. Be proactive rather than reactive. Have a grants calendar. People can only help you if they know you exist. Profile, profile, profile. And cultivating a relationship with the funding body, talking to them well in advance of the next funding round. So Commonwealth Government grant guidelines, they want to see that what they say or you set out to achieve is what you're going to do. So obviously I need to see a clear line of project management, project delivery, okay, project rationale, methodology. These are the terminology now that's coming up again and again and again in grants, basically. But quintessentially, they're business processes anyway, at the end of the day. Grants are given to make a difference. Something has to happen with the money tangibly, and they want evidence and proof. So you're constantly doing evaluation. You're constantly doing reports. And look, you should be doing that for your business anyway. You know, as an upskill basically for yourself to measure and monitor and appraise how good you are delivering on project management on this activity that you receive funding for. But quintessentially, you're going to be reporting back to government anyway, so you need to do this. Enablement is a very much big buzzword in grants from Canberra. And I think it's a word you need to be understanding of, as well as all the other terminology in the last bullet point. People say to me that grant speak is like another language you have to learn. It is to a degree, because it's all about positive language in a grants application, right? And inclusive language, like we are, we will, rather than if, but, maybe, okay? Positive language is that determination that you're going to go through with this, that government money could be supplementary, or it could be an additional add-on. So you've made the cake, now you're putting the cream on the cake. Really, this is the way you need to advocate it and sell, sell, sell. But I don't mind you using words like flexible, responsive, managing risk, advancing participation, all of those things, as long as you substantiate them. So make a statement, back it up, and back it up with stats and facts and evidence, basically, that either you've researched yourself or undertaken, or referencing other government documents, basically, that can give correlation of mindset and argument at the end of the day. So work with other connectors in the tourism community, internal and external resourcing. Do you need to bring someone in to write this grant application? Or do you have someone on staff already that you need to go back to, basically? Marketing and comms can help you a lot with that as well. Local, state and federal current affairs, subscribe to the mail outs, subscribe to the newsletters, know what government's saying about funding in the areas and in the departments from state and federal government level, and even local government authorities from your local economic development manager. All of those things are important basics, so you're aware, so it'll help you build your grants calendar and know what's out there for you to expand further and apply for the right grants, okay? Quintessentially in a grant, you're answering these questions. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it? And how much do you want? That's building your base narrative of that, okay? So you need to be very mindful of that at the end of the day, okay? So carefully follow the instructions, tailor proposal specific budget into request project that you've looked for. Use positive language, as I said, shorter is better. Keep your proposal tight and details condensed. But document the problem on multiple levels, but be specific. So there's obviously a downturn in the tourism industry because of COVID-19, but how it's affecting you locally, how it's affecting you regionally, relate that back, just as much as you talk about Australia quintessentially. Talk about an investment rather than a gift. Avoid dwelling on problems, focus on opportunities. And provide a realistic assessment of the urgency. I know you needed money yesterday. Government funding rounds now are trying to get them out quicker than ever. We just saw Victoria there the other day. They got turnaround on funding within 2 weeks. Normally it could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or even months. So I think government's certainly trying to expedite the COVID-19 stimulus package funding. Normal grant funding rounds, though, could take weeks or months, okay? Just to make you wary of that. So this is one of 3 project plans that I use, and I wanted to share one with you today. And this is how I conceptualize my project before I think about basically going out and asking for funding for it. So project title, less than 10 words. Project summary, up to 100 words, encompassing all of what I put in there in 100 words. And that's where you have to come down to drafting and editing, because it has to be a purposeful document and a readable document at the end of the day. And then your full project plan or your full project description, okay, in 1,000 words, all of what I've encompassed there in bullet points. That's what you need to think about as well, all right? That builds a good narrative, that builds a good business case, which is very important, obviously. And then a lot of this content that you've written will be translatable across your grant application at the end of the day, which is very important. So you're going to do the hard yakka up front, which is great, rather than getting the grant application form and suddenly go, right, now what am I going to write? You've already written a lot of it. You will have to amend some of it, obviously, to make it pertinent and relevant to that particular grant, but a lot of it will have been written in advance already. So Commonwealth Government Grants Administration, 7 key principles according to federal government, and look how much they love the words effective and efficient. But if you stick by these 7 key principles, you're going to do quite well. So robust planning and design, outcomes orientation, proportionality, removing the risk factor, as I said, government, real concern for that. Collaboration and partnership, that's why I've been on about it the whole time, because I'm subscribing to what government are saying and what they want to see. Governance and accountability, probity and transparency, big one, internal controls. And again, achieving value with public money, that BFM, that value for money, which is so pertinent and so relevant at the end of the day. So my top 10, make it about your reader, your prospective client, answer the question, try not to waffle, make it clear what's in it for them, be direct in your answering, avoid sweeping statements, give great examples, those mini case studies. Remember, looks can kill. If it looks sloppy, you must be a sloppy organization. Jog their memory if you've been in receipt of funding from the past. Indicatively put that into the grant application to show you've been worthy of funding in the past, and make it word perfect. Old journalistic adage, count your words and make your words count. Okay, very important. And that's me. If you have any questions or queries, I'm happy to take them now, but basically, obviously, they're my contact details and I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me. Happy to go with the questions.
Thanks, Keith. That was a very informative and concise session there. Some very key and obvious themes, but crucial to success in this space. Like you talk about being positive, being specific and on point. And that on point one really sticks with me. It reminds me a lot of when people apply for jobs.
Yes.
And they cover everything about themselves and their career, except for the selection criteria in the job advert. The
very much so.
For you, if you look for it and you spend the time up front to go through it. I had a couple of questions before the session started, so we might kick off with those.
Sure.
First one is whether an eligible business can apply for both the Small Business COVID-19 Support Grant and the Bushfire Support Grant and receive approval for both. I assume yes, but wanted to double check.
Correct, it is yes, you can. No problem whatsoever.
I think for most of the funding at the moment, I can't recall any that are exclusive. Like none of them state this is the only bucket of funds.
No, not in the you're right. Not in the present circumstances. They wouldn't dare think of doing that, basically. And again, government are trying to make as much as possible available, because obviously we've had a real tough time of it in Australia. Obviously, was first with the fires and the floods, and obviously now as well with COVID-19. So they're trying to make sure there's much funding available and make people knowledgeable about that. Yes, so no problem at all. Apply for both, please.
Okay, just had a few comments coming through about sharing the presentation in this webinar. We will do that after this session. So anyone registered for today's session will receive the slides and a link to the webinar, which has been recorded there. Another question. I'm interested to know what grant funding is specifically available for cafes and coffee roasters.
Nothing specific in that region, basically. So you need to be quantified as a small business. So you need to look at what I've stipulated already in terms of the small business grant. New South Wales government that they have to release is the stimulus package. So it'll be quantified as small business, basically. So look at what's available for small business, but nothing, they won't do that sector breakdown that far. There needs to be an overarching sector, basically. So there'll be certain genres of business they've focused on. So tourism's been one, obviously, manufacturing's been another, retail has been another. So you need to look at what's available there, obviously. But they're looking at quintessentially job saving, job generation, training, upskilling, and then a focus on regional or rural as well, obviously, very much so outside of metro areas. But specific to a cafe or a coffee shop, you're looking at identifiability, the small business grant, you're looking at basically, and the other business grants that are available to you from New South Wales government and from federal government. So COVID stimulus package one side, government grants on the other side, and that's at federal and state.
Okay, excellent. Now we'll start going through the ones submitted through the chat functionality. Keith speaks a lot about showing runs on the board and what you have done before. What if this is your first grant application?
Just benchmark it against something of equivocal size and nature that may have happened somewhere else in Australia or across the state. So if it's new and it hasn't been done before, basically, whether you're bringing a product to market, a service to market, or you're doing something in infrastructure, basically, just give me an equivocal. We've seen international benchmarks in the past as well of size and nature, something similar standard. And I need to see the demography. I need to see what you've done your market analysis. You've shown me indicatively that you understand the marketplace that you're bringing this to. They want it, need it, desire it. And it's not going to become a white elephant, basically, when it's produced for the local area. So again, just show me that you've done your market research. Show me that basically you understand the local area, you've built connections in the local area, and that's substantiated. But show me an equivocal. Just show me something of a benchmark for mindset, so I can have a mind share with you to understand the size and nature of this project and the practicality of delivering it in the area you're looking to roll it out in, vis-a-vis where it's been rolled out before.
Okay. In a similar vein, that's a great way to demonstrate latent demand or demand being out there. In terms of their capability, if they're relatively new to the industry, and they may have had quite a career change, but the funding is relevant, any tips you can give on people in demonstrating their ability to deliver when it is a fairly new initiative in their kind of career?
Yeah, I think it's the profiling like I talked about before. Certainly, basically, it may not be relevant to what they're doing now compared to what they did in the past, but building up that story narrative or business storytelling, which includes their professional bio on their LinkedIn, and then being an industry leader, which is leading the narrative. So they may have been, you know, as we've seen in the sector now, people going from being an airline pilot basically to doing something completely different because of COVID-19. And they're building their brand narrative around them basically and what they've done in market industries and small business. And that could have been an aside in the past, but now it's their prevalent service sector or industry or job. They've built a narrative on their proficiencies of what they've done in their previous sector to what they make it translatable to what they're doing now. So there are translatable skill sets, obviously, from everything you've done in your past in your career and what you've learned. Make sure you evoke those and sell those, and make sure you quantify and qualify that you're bringing that 20 years experience in the workplace and whatever you've done to apply to what you're doing now.
And I guess those kind of examples, this is where it's particularly prevalent, where you need to ideally collaborate, bring in other partners who have that credibility, or also look for support, whether it's a letter of support from a relevant organisation. I imagine that's quite key as well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, not only relevant organisation, but obviously your state and federal MPs who advocate new business, new entrepreneurials, new startups, new innovation coming into the area basically. And it's a new and improved way potentially of doing it, which is what everyone wants to see anyway. So again, just quantify what you have, quantify how you can sell it.
Okay. Is there any grants for cancellation of tourist event due to the virus? No.
Unfortunately not. I wish there was, but no. I think you're being offered obviously the ticket is still valid potentially, or the event is still valid. They're rescheduling it for a year in advance, or basically you can get a refund. But no, there's no, unfortunately, subsidy at the moment for that.
Okay. One question here asks if you could repeat the websites that stated all available grants besides grants.gov.au.
Yeah, that actually is business.gov.au, so that's the federal one. And then you have Grant Connect, which is a really good one as well. Then you have innovation.nsw.gov.au. Then you have the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment at New South Wales state level. And because you're near enough, not too far away, a great resource actually is Business Queensland, which is really good. A lot of really good stuff on business grants. That's translatable in terms of IP, basically. Obviously, Destination New South Wales, a lot of resources on that website, and your own website, obviously, as well. But they're the big ones I always look at, basically, at the end of the day, as well as local government, by the way. Obviously, check out your LGA, which would be really, really good as well. And the last one probably I'd like to talk about is Regional Development Australia. It's a lot of good resources on the RDA, basically, a lot of the time as well. So seek out your local RDA and see what resources they've got on their website.
Okay. This next one we might attack in components. Interested to know how not-for-profit organisations that run business events in the region can access grants and benefit from recovery funds, particularly in the youth space.
Yeah, I think they need to look at philanthropy. I think they need to look at private trusts and foundations and public and private ancillary funds. I think there's still a lot of grants still up and running in terms of philanthropy. And I think if they have the eligibility based around what's called their DGR status, deductible gift recipient status, which they can check out at the ato.gov.au, the Australian Tax Office. I think they're really going to be looking at that. Then you have some club grants are still in existence as well, depending on the LGA. They need to look at that. And then obviously some local government grants are still alive and well if their funding round hasn't expired already, basically. So they're the 3 or 4 identifiable options for an organisation like that.
Where would you suggest they seek information or opportunities around the philanthropic, if I said that correctly?
Yeah, so there's a couple of good websites to check out. Number one's Our Community. Another one's Grant Guru. Another one's Strategic Grants. And there's another guy called the Grants Guy. He's not bad either, basically, I hear, but you can give him a bell and I'll happily advise you. You need to have that grants calendar. So those ones are subscription services. You pay an annual fee, optimally about $300 a year. They'll send you out an email every fortnight or month with a listing of all the grants that are coming up, basically, or about to expire. And that's what you need to subscribe to at the end of the day. Not so much necessarily coming out of government in that regard, basically, in terms of a lot of free resources there, but they don't cover often the philanthropic resources. So government will obviously advocate their own government grant funding, nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if you want those lists, they're the ones to look at. Probably another one to look at is as well, number 2 are Pro Bono Australia and then Philanthropy Australia.
Okay, excellent. The second half of this question states Destination New South Wales funding for regional conferencing business events is not running this year. Just to clarify, that will not be rolled out this financial year. We don't know beyond the end of June what Destination New South Wales will be doing that, as they're still working through their budgetary issues. So that's just one to keep in mind. Is there anything else available for business events that have been impacted by COVID and the public gathering laws?
Not at the present time, but obviously the market's so fluid at the moment, things change by day, both from state and federal government. So there's a lot of formulation still taking place. I think I mentioned it previously today that I see and I know basically there'll be more grants forthcoming, obviously before end of financial year across a number of business service sectors. So people need to be wary and prepared for that and get grant ready. Hence we're doing the webinar today. But not that I'm knowledgeable at the moment, apart from what's been already released.
Okay. Next one, how much time should one put into a grant application, in particular the DNSW regional event funding? I imagine that's as long as it takes.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as it takes to get the application in. As long as it's not a rush job. That's what I see all too often, Mike. I can't substantiate that at the end of the day. Look, it's going to be weeks. Let's look at it. It's going to be a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's going to be a quality application. Basically, you're going to take time to edit, proofread it, do a couple of drafts of it, get an objective third party potentially to look through it. All of these components, right? So you need to do that. So again, you need to spend time and capacity on doing that and look at what you have. Do a piece of research. Look at your own business plans and policies. Like I said, business plan, project plan, etc., capex. And then obviously write the grant application. So that's not days, that's weeks. So optimally, you know, people always say how long's a piece of string with grants, but it depends on the grant, obviously, and depends how long it takes. But, you know, I would say, look, 2-3 weeks, for any grant really to get it right. If it's a smaller grant, $5,000-$10,000, you probably could do it in a week. But the bigger ones, certainly substantive value from 50,000 and above, that's a couple of weeks work.
Okay. A grant I'm researching at the moment has an indicative table of how many applications are likely to be funded in round 1 across 5 and 6 figures funding amount bands. It's indicative of the competitive nature of the grant program, but is there anything else that should be interpreted from this? Did you understand that? Sorry, I didn't read that well.
Look, grants are structured basically, obviously, in different rounds in terms of funding that's aligned to each funding round. We work off a marking matrix basically, and we work off a percentage matrix as grants assessors basically, but we're also working off how much money needs to be syndicated out round 1, round 2, round 3. So for me, basically, yes, it's obviously you want to be in the first pot, until the pot diminishes even further, obviously, but it still gives you a sporting chance for round 2 and round 3. So optimally, I think that I wouldn't be necessarily concerned about it. I'd be more concerned about putting in a quality application that actually makes you there prevalent and prominent, and go by what I've said so far, that people perceive you to be a market leader. Then you'll go into pot 1, stay in pot 1, and be evaluated from pot 1, which is where you want to be for a better sporting chance of attaining that funding.
Okay. Do you have examples of organisations that for-profit businesses could be auspiced by, and what is the process of doing so? Do we present them with a proposal?
Yeah, it's a business pitch. It really is, and it's signing that MOU with them basically, or a contract of agreement as a service provider or a subcontractor. I think you need to look at it from that point of view, and it'd be very advantageous for any business to think about that right now. And then lining, basically encircling the wagons in terms of your subcontractors and suppliers, as well as basically advocating yourself up to someone else basically and being a subcontractor for them. So yeah, it's a business pitch. It's a bit of business development. You're going to have to put together a pitch plan or a pitch document for them and show the buy-in for them and where the value is for them to come on board, obviously, and then much just advocating the services and the quality of service that you deliver. So yeah, it is a pitch document.
Okay. If you're in the startup phase for your business and pre-revenue, are you still eligible to apply for grants if you include comparative data to support the application?
You are, but I would base my answer on case specifics into what grant that we'd be referring to. Basically, every grant's different, and that's a fundamental point to make to everyone here today, that don't do it on a case-by-case basis. Don't do a copy and paste with grants, because it's not going to work for you. But there may be something there, but I'd need to look into it further to give you a substantive answer, basically. Yeah, I'd need to look into it further. I'd rather not commit to an answer, basically, that could be misappropriated or just wrong.
Okay. The next question asks, are there people that you can consult with that professionally work on grant applications? Did you write them, Pete? And finding relevant grants for a business? The answer to that one is yes. Well,
yeah.
The name behind him says that. He's not the only one, but he has the one we have here today who's demonstrating his expertise and skill. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, thanks very much. Checks in the post.
Okay. Just another one I was thinking about as you're talking about before, for recurring funding streams. So, you know, like event funding, quite often people go back year after year or different ones. Do you have any tips in the application process to ensure a smooth audit process and a better opportunity receiving those funds again next year?
Yeah, I think you've answered your own question, is have that streamlined audit process basically. It very much based it on critical thinking and streamlined processes basically, that you're on time, on budget, deliver your evaluations, do your audit, do your acquittal, basically everything, substantiate the relationship, get them out to do site visits, get them involved, participate to whatever varying degree they want to be, basically, to get them across the line in the mindset. Continuation of approach, continuation of relationship, basically talk to them all the time without plaguing them. But it's really about that relationship piece and substantiating that and delivering that. And that's quality of reporting as much as quality of relationship. And that's why I'm constantly reiterating that throughout the webinar. Basically, we're just not seeing enough of that evaluation piece to substantiate multi-year grants or future funding. And people are just compartmentalizing it, whereby I'll apply for this pot of cash, and then I'll worry about the next pot of cash the next year when I do have to do an application again.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. You need to play the long-term game. You certainly need to play the medium to long-term game and understand that basically. So again, it's about now consolidating in the time you have and coming out of it post-COVID-19 and going, who do I need to talk to then? Who do I need to sit down and have a cup of coffee with, explain who I am and what I want to do and where I fit into what they're trying to achieve basically. So you're right. It's very much vigilant. The vigilant entities that are very much articulate about dotting the I's and crossing the T's are the ones that are going to be well rewarded in the future.
Yeah. And it's really that balancing at the start of the process of, we all get that desire to get as much funds as we can and to be as grand as we can, but that ability to deliver and to be able to demonstrate the delivery and the achievement of the goals is absolutely key in this, isn't it? So just
very much so, which means you need to use business measurement tools to quantify and qualify everything you're doing. I mean, which is the evaluation process basically, which starts day one, not day end, by the way, as well. We see so many people doing evaluation when they get a reminder email, basically, you're a week overdue with your evaluation. Where is it? Oh, I'll start it now. Well, why didn't you start it when you started the project? You know, it's really thinking about everything you're doing day, week, month, the whole way through the project, because this is a business process that should be integral in your organization anyway, let alone doing it for grants. Like everything I do myself as a business is measured and appropriated, yeah? Because otherwise I won't have a roadmap of where I need to be and how I'm going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most prominent funds out at the moment is the bushfire recovery funds that have been distributed by Austrade. I imagine you've been probably liaising with a variety of potential applicants on that one. Being so prominent and so relevant at the moment, any specific tips for that pool of funds and applying through there?
Well, interesting enough, I know that some of those funds have been undercapitalized, which means some of those funds haven't had application numbers that they would have expected. Which is very interesting commentary. And I know that's the same's been reciprocated in far north Queensland with the floods funding, even from a number of years ago in Townsville, where I know only a certain component of that has been dispensed, which is unbelievable statement to make, basically. You would think that everyone would be clamoring for that funding, basically, at the end of the day. Look, take on board everything I've said about funding generally and apply it to the bushfire funding. Go through the program, articulate, apply for it. But again, basically talk about what you're going to do with it in the future, about the rebuild, the value you're going to do, and basically what's there. It's going to come from it again at the end of the day. Don't go there with the handout mentality or attitude, I quintessentially say. So look at a constructive way of putting that forward. It's there for you. It's there for you to benefit from, and rightly so, because you've suffered from the bushfire in some shape or form. But don't take it as a given and don't take it as granted at the same time.
Okay, another question's just come through. What recommendations would you have in terms of finding the right operators to collaborate with, and what specific benefits are there in terms of partnering with local government, councils and RTOs?
Oh, I think the latter half first. I think there's a huge benefit to partnering with local government and RTOs and other agencies as well, because they'll capacity build your own application, let alone capacity build your organization. Because you know, doing a gap analysis for any business, you're not going to have everything. You may have things to 80 or 90% value, but you're going to be lacking in something. So you need always people to circle yourself with experts, to circle yourself with people who are going to grow your business for you at the end of the day. So the partnerships is huge, and having a targeted approach is very specific to that. I've recommended a couple of government agencies there and departments. Go in there, investigate the opportunities if there's something for you. Look, I know a lot of these people who work in these departments, they're very, very good at what they do. They're big advocates of the local community that they work in, basically. And they do the brokerage and advocacy piece quite well. But get known by them, build that relationship with them, show them again what you're trying to achieve, even if it's left of field, innovative, even if it's innovative, even if it's completely something different, quantify it and qualify it, and show how it's pertinent and relevant to the local economy and the local demography, basically, and why it's needed and why you're needed to deliver it.
Yeah, and I think it's key as well in terms of showing that symmetry and alignment of goals and strategy with the relevant government, RTO or partners. We have it all the time with Destination New South Wales funding. One of the criteria is that you need to show an alignment of goals with where we're aiming to take the industry. So, and it's not a hard process. Our destination management plan is very easy to find, very action driven. So for most people in the events, nature-based, a whole variety of space for them, very easy to find that relevance there that gives them a whole lot more credibility.
Yeah, and there has to be some expectation put on you, the applicant, and you make a valid point that, you know, those destination management plans, I bring that up in conversation with a lot of my client core from the tourism, and they're like, I'm sorry, what? And it's like, the fact that you don't know it, that's an impediment in the first instance. The fact that you haven't read it, that's another impediment in the second instance. So that's your bedtime reading for the next week, is to go through that and circle where you fit into that. And that's very important. And that's the same with I see this with a lot of economic profiles that are produced by LGAs and economic development managers at local government. They sit beautifully on the website, and then people don't know it's one of the best documents they can read in terms of what the local government authority are trying to achieve for the local visitor economy or the local economy overall in terms of retailers and manufacturers. You need to read this stuff. You need to read this stuff. There's no shortened way of doing it. There's no shortcuts you can take. And people always say that with grants, you know, let's cut some corners. Can you write the grant in a day? Basically, let's just get it done. No, all right? I'm called the grants guy, not the miracle guy, all right? So in the end of the day, there's no shortcuts to this process. The people who get the grants are the people who spend time and effort on it.
Yeah, quality information. No further questions have come through. So unless any come through in the next 30 seconds, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your time here today, Keith, and your expertise. This has been highly valuable. Once again, to the audience today, just reiterating that we will distribute the presentation and the link to the webinar to everybody who registered for the session. So all this information will be readily available for you. We're more than happy to continue facilitating these series of webinars that we have. The the breaking down of the funding last week was hugely popular. I feel today's session has been highly valuable as well. So if there's anything that we can do to add value to what you're doing or help the recovery process, don't hesitate in contacting myself or Jackie with suggestions for future webinars, and we'll look to set up further sessions that help us all come out of this crisis as well as we can. So thank you all for attending, and thanks again for your time. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.